Canada doesn't really have a reputation for changing how the world eats. When people think of Canadian food, they think of maple syrup, maybe poutine, maybe something warm you eat in the winter and forget about 5 minutes later. But here's what's interesting. Some of the most widely consumed foods on the planet were either invented in Canada, shaped in Canada, or completely reimagined there, and almost nobody knows it. There's a pizza that started in a small Ontario restaurant that somehow turned into a global argument. There's a cooking oil sitting in millions of kitchens right now that literally has Canada in the name, and people still don't connect it. There's even a cocktail Canadians drink hundreds of millions of times a year that barely exists anywhere else. And once you start looking into it, you realize this keeps happening over and over again. Let's start with something that feels almost too ordinary to even talk about: coffee crisp. If you grew up in Canada, this is just there. It's always been there. Convenience stores, vending machines, hockey arenas, grocery store checkouts, you grab one without thinking about it. It's a wafer bar, light layers, coffee-flavored cream, covered in milk chocolate. Nothing about it looks revolutionary, but that's exactly why it lasted. It goes back to the 1930s, when a British confectionery company developed it through its Canadian division. At the time, most chocolate bars were dense, heavy, and honestly a bit much for something you'd eat casually. The idea behind Coffee Crisp was different. Make something lighter, something people could eat quickly, something that didn't feel like a full commitment. And it worked. When that company was eventually acquired by Nestle, a lot of products went global. Coffee Crisp didn't. Not because it failed, not because there wasn't demand, it just stayed. And Canadians didn't push for it to expand either. It became one of those quiet staples that just belonged there. If you leave Canada for a while, it's one of the things people notice is missing. It's not flashy, it's not heavily marketed. It just stayed consistent for decades, which is probably the reason it never disappeared. Now, compare that to something that Canadians didn't just adopt, they fully claimed: the Caesar. Walk into almost any bar in Canada and you'll find it. Brunch menus, patios, casual restaurants, upscale spots, it's everywhere. And the numbers are wild. Canadians drink hundreds of millions of Caesars every single year. But step outside Canada and try ordering one. You'll probably get a pause, maybe a confused look, maybe someone trying to figure out if you meant a Bloody Mary. It was created in Calgary in 1969 by Walter Chell. He was opening a new restaurant and needed a signature drink that would stand out. He spent months testing combinations. What he landed on sounds strange if you haven't had one before. Clamato juice, which is tomato juice mixed with clam broth, vodka, Worcestershire sauce, hot sauce, celery salt on the rim. On paper, it sounds like something that shouldn't work, but it does. It's savory, slightly spicy, a bit salty. It almost feels like a meal and a drink at the same time. The Bloody Mary already existed, so this wasn't about copying anything. It was about creating something with more depth, and for whatever reason, Canada embraced it immediately. It never really crossed over the same way globally. The clam element was a barrier for a lot of people, so it stayed. And now it's one of the clearest examples of a national food culture that developed in its own lane. Then you have something that didn't come from restaurants at all: butter tarts. These are deeply tied to small towns, family kitchens, and community baking. A butter tart is simple: pastry shell filled with butter, sugar, syrup, and egg, baked until the filling sets. But the real conversation starts after that, because there's a divide. Some people want the center firm, others want it soft, almost runny, and people feel strongly about this. Recipes go back to the early 1900s, but the technique likely goes back even further, tied to early settler cooking and whatever ingredients were available at the time. What's interesting is how they spread. Not through big brands, not through restaurants, through community cookbooks, through local bakeries, through people sharing recipes. There are entire festivals built around butter tarts now. People travel specifically to try different versions. And outside Canada, most people have never even heard of them. Now take that same idea of community-driven food and simplify it even further. Nanaimo bars. No oven, no baking. You mix the base, press it into a pan, add a custard layer, then chocolate on top. Chill it, slice it, serve it. That's it. It showed up in British Columbia in the 1950s, particularly around the city of Nanaimo. And it spread quickly, mostly because it was practical. You could make a large batch without much effort, perfect for gatherings, potlucks, events where you needed to feed a lot of people without spending hours in the kitchen. At one point, Nanaimo actually held a contest to determine the official version. Hundreds of recipes submitted, one selected as the standard. It's one of the few desserts where the origin is tied to a specific place in a very direct way. Now this one causes confusion outside Canada, because what people call Canadian bacon is usually not what Canadians are talking about. Peameal bacon is different. It comes from pork loin, not the belly. It's cured, then rolled in cornmeal, sliced thick, and cooked. The result is leaner, less smoky, more dense. The method goes back to the late 1800s, when a Toronto pork packer needed a way to preserve meat for shipping overseas. Rolling it in ground peas and later cornmeal helped extend its shelf life. Over time, it became a local staple. And if you go to St. Lawrence Market in Toronto, the Peameal bacon sandwich is still one of the most well-known food experiences in the city. It's simple: a bun, mustard, thick slices of bacon. But it's something that never really spread globally the way the name did. Now picture this. It's winter. You're outside. It's cold. There's a skating rink nearby. And you're holding something hot in your hands. That's where BeaverTails live. Fried dough, stretched flat, shaped like a beaver's tail, topped with things like cinnamon sugar or chocolate spread. They were created in the late 1970s based on a family recipe and started out at fairs and festivals. And they stayed tied to that environment. You don't usually sit down and eat one inside. It's something you grab outside, eat while walking around, usually in the cold. Then, in 2009, Barack Obama visited Ottawa and stopped at a BeaverTails stand. It made international news. Suddenly, this very local food had global attention. But even now, it still feels tied to a specific place and moment. Now this one shows how food changes when it moves. Ginger beef. Created in Calgary in the 1970s by a chef adapting Chinese cooking techniques to local tastes. Crispy beef, sweet and spicy sauce, strong ginger flavor. It became popular across Western Canada, but if you go to China, it doesn't exist there. It's not traditional. It's something new that came out of blending cultures. And that's how a lot of food actually develops in practice. Not by preserving something exactly as it was, but by adapting it to where you are. Now the most debated one, Hawaiian pizza. It was created in Ontario in the early 1960s by a restaurant owner experimenting with toppings. He added pineapple. That's it. No intention to start a trend, no plan. It spread. Then it spread further, and eventually became one of the most ordered pizzas in the world. At the same time, it became one of the most controversial. People argue about it constantly. Some love it, some hate it. Entire debates exist around it. And it all started from a simple experiment in a small restaurant. And the next one, Montreal bagels. Montreal bagels look familiar until you actually compare them. They're smaller, denser, slightly sweet, boiled in honey water, then baked in wood-fired ovens. That gives them a different texture entirely. They come from Jewish immigrants who brought their baking traditions to Montreal, and over time, it evolved into something distinct. Two shops in particular, Fairmount and St. Viateur, have been making them for decades. Still open 24 hours, still using wood-fired ovens, and people still argue about which one is better. Instant mashed potatoes is another Canadian-born food. This one started with a practical problem. How do you make food that can be stored, transported, and prepared quickly? A Canadian scientist working for the government in the 1960s focused on potatoes. He developed a process to cook, mash, and dehydrate them into flakes. Add hot water, and you have mashed potatoes almost instantly. It moved from military use into everyday kitchens. Now, it's everywhere. Pablum. This one started with a completely different goal: helping infants. Doctors in Toronto developed a pre-cooked cereal fortified with vitamins to address malnutrition. It was safe, easy to prepare, and widely distributed. Instead of keeping profits, the royalties went back into the hospital, and it spread globally. This one surprised me: Macintosh apples. A farmer finds a wild apple tree, transplants it. One tree produces a unique type of apple. That apple spreads across North America, and eventually even influences the name of a computer. That's the entire story. Slurpee. Technology. A broken soda machine leads to frozen drinks. Someone builds a machine to recreate it. Canadian engineering refines it. It becomes consistent, scalable, and global. Now it's everywhere. Finally, something that's probably in your kitchen: canola oil. Developed in Canada by modifying an existing plant to make it safe for consumption. The name literally comes from Canadian oil, low acid. Now it's one of the most used cooking oils in the world. When you look at all of these together, a pattern starts to show up. A lot of these weren't created to become global products. They were created to solve problems, or just to try something, or because someone had an idea and decided to test it. And then they spread. Sometimes quietly, sometimes by accident, sometimes without anyone really tracking where they came from. And now they're just part of everyday life, even if most people have no idea where they started.